The moment Braxton Whitmore dialed 911 on a black teenager with a MacBook, he had no idea the crying woman begging for mercy 30 minutes later would be his own mother. The Rose Bowl McDonald's security cameras captured every second of what happened that October afternoon, footage that would eventually be watched over 50 million times. But before I show you the $50,000 mistake that destroyed 3 families in just 47 minutes, you need to understand something about power prejudice and the devastating consequences of weaponizing authority against the innocent. Before we dive into this incredible story, if stories about everyday heroes standing up to injustice inspire you like they inspire me, that thanks button below helps me find and share more of these powerful moments. Your support literally helps these stories reach people who need to hear them most, especially those facing similar situations who need to know they're not alone. Every contribution, no matter how small, goes directly into uncovering more stories like Zara's stories that remind us change is possible when we stand together. And to everyone who's already supported this channel, thank you for believing these voices deserve to be heard. Now let me tell you what happened to Zara Okafor on what started as just another Thursday afternoon. The autumn sun filtered through the McDonald's windows on Riverside Boulevard as 16-year-old Zara Okafor settled into her favorite corner booth at 3:47 p.m. Her rose gold MacBook caught the light as she opened it, revealing a half-finished college essay that would ironically be titled "Why I Still Believe in Justice." The laptop's edge bore an engraving in Spanish that most people never noticed: "Para mi guerrera, Mom 2023, a detail that would become crucial evidence in the next hour. Zara had discovered this McDonald's 3 months earlier, when her family moved to Riverside Heights, and the free Wi-Fi had become her lifeline for completing homework while her mother worked double shifts. She pulled out her physics textbook, its pages marked with colorful tabs, and began typing furiously. The familiar restaurant sounds created a productive white noise around her, the beeping fryers, soft conversations, and the occasional announcement of order numbers. Mrs. Delgado, the afternoon manager, caught Zara's eye and smiled warmly. The older woman had grown fond of this studious teenager who always bought something and never caused problems, unlike some of the other high school students who treated the restaurant like their personal hangout spot. Zara's phone buzzed with a text from Mom, followed by a blue heart emoji. The contact name seemed oddly formal for a teenager's phone, missing the usual string of hearts or silly nicknames her classmates used. She typed back quickly at McD's, working on Northwestern essay. "Physics test tomorrow, too." The response came instantly. "Proud of you, baby. Remember, spine straight, mind sharper." It was their little ritual words her mother had taught her since kindergarten, though Zara had never fully understood why posture advice always came paired with mental preparation. 23 minutes into her study session, Zara had solved 2 practice problems and was deep into explaining quantum mechanics in terms a college admissions officer might actually understand when a shadow fell across her screen. She looked up to find Braxton Whitmore standing over her table, his Riverside Prep lacrosse jacket stretched across shoulders that had thrown 1,000 balls but never carried the weight of real adversity. His ice-blue eyes held an assessment she recognized immediately, the calculating look of someone deciding whether you belonged in their space. Behind Braxton stood Kai Nakamura, his constant companion since middle school, already recording on his phone with the practiced ease of someone who documented everything for potential social media content. Something flickered across Kai's face, a moment of hesitation that Zara caught but couldn't interpret. He shifted his weight nervously, the phone wavering slightly in his grip. "Nice laptop," Braxton said, his voice carrying that particular tone of entitlement wrapped in false friendliness. Real or knockoff, the question hung in the air like a challenge designed to provoke rather than inquire. Zara's fingers stilled on her keyboard as she met his gaze steadily. "Real as your prejudice," she responded quietly, watching his face flush at being called out so directly. Behind him, Kai's eyes widened slightly, the phone dipping for just a moment before he raised it again. Braxton's jaw tightened, but his smile remained fixed in place. That's a pretty expensive machine for someone who hangs out at McDonald's all day. His eyes swept over her worn backpack and the carefully mended tear in her denim jacket. Some of us actually buy our stuff instead of acquiring it through other means. The implication landed exactly where he intended, sharp and unmistakable. Zara felt the familiar knot form in her stomach, the one that appeared whenever someone decided her existence in their space required justification. Her hand moved almost imperceptibly toward her phone thumb, hovering over the emergency contact she'd programmed but never needed to use. "I'm a paying customer doing homework," she said, gesturing to her receipt tucked under a half-empty coffee cup. "Is there something specific you need?" "Yeah." Actually, Braxton leaned forward, planting both hands on her table with enough force to make her coffee jump. "I need you to stop pretending you belong here. My mom's friend works here mentioned seeing the same girl camping out for hours every day, taking up prime real estate." His voice dropped lower, more menacing. "Maybe it's time you found somewhere else to do whatever it is you're really doing." The words "my mom's friend" seemed to catch in his throat slightly, as if he'd revealed more than intended. Kai shifted behind him, lowering his phone momentarily. "Dude, maybe we should just—" he started, but Braxton cut him off with a sharp gesture. "No, I'm sick of this. Every day it's the same thing. These people thinking they can just take over spaces meant for actual customers. These people." The phrase sliced through the air between them, ugly and unmistakable. Zara's spine straightened, her mother's words echoing in her mind. She noticed Mrs. Delgado had stopped wiping down tables, her attention now fixed on the developing situation. The manager's hand moved to her pocket, pulling out her phone with practiced subtlety. "I'd like you to leave me alone now," Zara said, her voice admirably steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I'm not bothering anyone, and there are plenty of empty tables if your friends are coming." She gestured around the half-empty restaurant where several booths sat vacant and inviting. The logical response only seemed to infuriate Braxton further. "You think you're smart, don't you?" His voice rose slightly, drawing attention from other customers. "With your fancy laptop and your little study setup. But I know what this is really about. That Macbook's worth, what, $2,000, $3,000? Where does someone like you get that kind of money?" The accusation hung heavy in the air, each word carefully chosen to paint her as a thief without saying it outright. That's when Braxton's expression shifted, a calculating look replacing his anger. "Actually," said slowly, straightening up, "that looks exactly like the MacBook that was stolen from my car last week. Same color, same model." He turned to Kai, performance mode fully engaged. "Remember I filed that report about the break-in?" Kai's face went pale, the phone shaking slightly in his hand. "Dude, that's not the same," he started, but Braxton's glare silenced him immediately. The dynamic between them shifted, revealing who truly held power in their friendship. "Yeah," Kai mumbled, barely audible. "I remember." Zara's calm in that moment was remarkable, though only she knew it came from exhaustion rather than confidence. She'd been here before, maybe not this exact situation, but close enough to recognize the script. The accusation, the performance, the inevitable escalation. Her fingers found her phone, sending a quick message without looking at the screen. Then she closed her laptop, slowly, deliberately, making sure Braxton could see the engraving on its edge. "This laptop was a gift from my mother," she said clearly, "for my 16th birthday. I have the receipt, the box, and as you can see, it's engraved. Now please leave me alone before this goes somewhere you don't want it to go." The threat was empty. She had no power here, but something in her tone made Braxton hesitate for just a moment. That hesitation evaporated, quickly replaced by cold determination. "You're threatening me?" He pulled out his phone with theatrical indignation. You hear that, Kai? She's threatening me. I try to recover my stolen property and she threatens me. His fingers moved across the screen with practiced ease. You know what I'm done playing nice? The 3 digits he dialed were familiar to everyone in the restaurant. Several customers began recording with their phones, the modern instinct to document drama overriding any impulse to intervene. Mrs. Delgado stepped out from behind the counter, but Braxton held up a hand to stop her approach. Yes, I'd like to report a theft in progress, Braxton spoke into his phone, his voice taking on a concerned citizen tone that would have been convincing if not for the smirk playing at his lips. I'm at the McDonald's on Riverside Boulevard. There's a young woman here with what I believe is my stolen Macbook. His eyes never left Zara's face as he continued. African-American female, approximately 16, wearing a denim jacket. She's becoming aggressive now that I've confronted her. The lies flowed easily, each one building on the last. She's reaching into her bag repeatedly. I'm concerned she might have a weapon.
Some of the other customers look frightened.
His free hand gestured dramatically as if painting a picture for the dispatcher. I think she might be under the influence of something. Her behavior is really erratic. Zara sat frozen, watching her ordinary afternoon transform into something nightmarish. The physics problems on her screen seemed to belong to a different universe, one where logic and reason still applied. Around her, she could feel the shift in atmosphere as other customers began to see her differently, suspicious glances replacing the previous indifference. No, I'll wait here, Braxton continued into the phone. I don't want her to run off with my property. Yes, I have a witness. Thank you, officers should hurry. The situation feels like it's escalating. He ended the call with exaggerated concern, then settled into the booth across from Zara with satisfied confidence. They'll be here in 5 minutes. I suggest you think about how you want to explain yourself. Mrs. Delgado finally reached them, her face a mask of professional calm hiding personal fury. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to... Ma'am, I've called the authorities about my stolen property. I'd appreciate it if you didn't interfere with a crime in progress. The confidence in his voice was absolute, the assurance of someone who'd never faced real consequences. This young lady is a regular customer, Mrs. Delgado said firmly. She's here almost every day, never causes any problems. Always polite, always purchases something. I can vouch for her character. The defense was heartfelt, but Braxton dismissed it with a wave. With all due respect, you don't know what she does outside of here. Lots of criminals have day jobs. Or in this case, study spots. The next few minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. Zara remained seated, knowing that any movement would be interpreted as suspicious or aggressive. Her phone buzzed repeatedly, but she didn't dare check it, unwilling to give Braxton more ammunition. The coffee in her cup had gone cold, but she sipped it anyway, needing something to do with her hands. Kai had stopped recording his discomfort, visible in every line of his body. Twice he started to say something to Braxton, and twice he stopped himself. The internal conflict was written across his face, loyalty warring with conscience in real time. Around them, the restaurant had taken on the feeling of a theater, everyone waiting for the next act to begin. The sound of sirens grew from distant to deafening, and through the windows, Zara could see 2 police cruisers pulling into the parking lot. Her heart hammered against her ribs as officers Rodriguez and Chen entered their hands, resting casually on their utility belts, in that way that was meant to be non-threatening but never quite achieved it. Rodriguez was older, with gray threading through his black hair and the weathered look of someone who'd seen too much. Chen appeared younger, maybe 5 years on the force, with nervous energy that made Zara's anxiety spike higher. We received a call about a theft in progress, Rodriguez announced, his voice carrying easily through the now silent restaurant. His eyes swept the scene, taking in Braxton's confident posture, Zara's rigid stillness, and the phones pointed in their direction from various angles. The situation assessment took seconds, but felt like hours. Braxton jumped to his feet with eager helpfulness. "Yes, sir. That's her right there. She has my Macbook that was stolen from my car last week." When I confronted her about it, she became aggressive and threatening. "I'm concerned for everyone's safety here." The performance was polished, hitting all the right notes of civic duty and reasonable fear. Rodriguez's gaze settled on Zara, and something flickered in his expression. Recognition dawned slowly across his features, though he kept his voice neutral. "Miss, I'm going to need to see some identification." The request was standard, but the tone held something else, a careful quality that Braxton didn't catch, but Zara did. With trembling fingers, Zara pulled out her student ID from Riverside High. The school photo showed her smiling, an image from before she'd learned to navigate spaces where her presence was constantly questioned. Rodriguez studied it carefully, his eyebrows rising slightly. He showed it to Chen, who also reacted with subtle surprise. "Zara Okafor Rodriguez," read aloud, then paused meaningfully. "Are you by any chance related to Sergeant Amara Thompson?" The question dropped into the silence like a stone into still water, sending ripples through everyone present. Braxton's confident smile faltered slightly, though he didn't yet understand why the officer's tone had shifted. "She's my mother," Zara said quietly, the words feeling strange in her mouth. She rarely mentioned her mother's profession, having learned early that it complicated every interaction in ways she couldn't predict. Some people became overly friendly, others hostile, and she never knew which she'd get until it was too late. The change in the room was immediate but subtle. Rodriguez's posture shifted almost imperceptibly, while Chen took a small step back. Even Braxton seemed to sense something had changed, though his privileged worldview couldn't quite process what. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every micro-expression and gesture. "I see," Rodriguez said slowly, his tone now walking a careful line between professional duty and something else. "And this Macbook, can you tell me about it? When did you acquire it? Do you have any proof of purchase?" The questions were routine, but delivered with a different energy, now less accusatory and more procedural. Zara gestured to the engraving on the laptop's edge. "It was a birthday gift from my mother. April 15th of this year. The receipt is at home, but as you can see, it's engraved with a personal message. The Apple Store on 5th Street did the engraving, they'd have records." Her voice grew stronger with each word, facts anchoring her in truth. "That's convenient," Braxton interjected, his voice taking on a harder edge. "Anyone can get something engraved after they steal it. Officers, I filed a report about my stolen MacBook last week. The case number is—" He pulled out his phone, scrolling frantically. "I have it here somewhere." While Braxton searched for evidence of a report that may or may not have existed, the door chimed again. A third police cruiser had arrived, this one unmarked, but with the subtle indicators that marked it as a supervisor's vehicle. The woman who stepped out moved with the controlled grace of someone comfortable with authority, her uniform crisp. Despite the long shift, her blonde hair pulled back in a regulation bun that somehow managed to look both professional and severe. Sergeant Amara Thompson's green eyes swept the parking lot in a single comprehensive glance before she entered the restaurant. The security footage would later show that she'd been 12 blocks away when the call came through, ostensibly heading to a completely different call. But something, maybe instinct, or maybe the universe's sense of dramatic timing, had brought her here instead. The moment she entered, her gaze found Zara immediately. The micro-expression that crossed her face would be analyzed endlessly in the viral videos, to come a flash of maternal fury so intense it could have melted steel, followed immediately by a professional composure settling over her features like armor. Officers Rodriguez and Chen straightened, instinctively recognizing a superior officer even before noting the stripes on her sleeve. "Sergeant Thompson," Rodriguez said clear relief in his voice. "We have a situation here regarding—" But Amara had already assessed everything she needed to know. Her daughter's rigid posture, the tears Zara refused to let fall, the entitled young man whose confidence was beginning to crack, and the phones recording everything. 20 years on the force had taught her to read a scene in seconds, and this one screamed setup. "That's my daughter," Amara said, her voice carrying a quality that made everyone in the restaurant take notice. The tone wasn't loud, but it commanded attention, cutting through tension like a blade through silk. "Someone want to explain why she's being questioned by police for doing homework?" The question hung in the air, deceptively simple but loaded with implications. Braxton's face went through a series of expressions as his brain processed this information. The woman before him didn't look like Zara, her pale skin and light hair, a stark contrast to her daughter's deep brown complexion and natural coil. But the authority in her voice was unmistakable, and the way Rodriguez and Chen deferred to her confirmed what his prejudiced mind struggled to accept. "Your daughter," Braxton stammered the words, seemingly stuck in his throat. "But she's—" The sentence died unfinished as 3 sets of police eyes turned to him with identical expressions of cold interest. Even Kai took another step back, his phone hanging forgotten at his side. Amara Thompson let the silence stretch just long enough for Braxton to fully comprehend his situation before stepping forward. Each movement was deliberate, measured, the kind of controlled motion that spoke of years of training in de-escalation, while internally calculating exactly how much force would be needed if things went south. She positioned herself between Braxton and her daughter without seeming to a protective gesture disguised as casual movement. "Yeah." My daughter Amara confirmed, her voice carrying that particular quality of forced calm that anyone who'd ever faced a furious parent would recognize. "Now I'm going to ask again, and this time I'd like a complete answer." She turned to Rodriguez, professional courtesy coating words sharp as winter ice. "What exactly is the nature of this call?" Rodriguez cleared his throat, suddenly finding his notepad fascinating. "We received a report of theft in progress, possible aggressive behavior, and potential weapon involvement." The caller indicated the suspect had stolen his Macbook and was acting erratically when confronted. His recitation sounded increasingly absurd with each detail, especially delivered to the suspect's mother, who happened to be his superior officer. Amara's eyebrows rose fractionally. Fascinating. And this caller would be... She turned her laser focus on Braxton, who seemed to be shrinking by the second. The confident lacrosse player who'd swaggered into the restaurant 40 minutes ago was rapidly dissolving into something much smaller and more frightened. Braxton started, then stopped, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Behind him, Kai had gone pale enough that Mrs. Delgado quietly pushed a chair in his direction, clearly worried the boy might faint. The manager's own phone was out now, and she was typing rapidly, though whether documenting events or calling corporate remained unclear. "Let me help you," Amara said, her tone suggesting help was the last thing Braxton was about to receive. "You call 911 to report my daughter, who was sitting here doing homework, as a thief. You claimed she had stolen your property, became aggressive when confronted, and might be armed." She paused, letting each accusation land like a physical blow. "Did I miss anything? She might have been on drugs," Chen supplied, helpfully consulting his notes. The caller suggested she was under the influence of something due to erratic behavior. The young officer seemed to be catching on to the situation's dynamics, his earlier nervousness replaced by something harder. Amara's smile was a thing of terrible beauty. Of course. Drugs. Because a teenage girl doing physics homework is clearly exhibiting drug-related behavior. "Tell me," she focused on Braxton again, "what specific behaviors led you to conclude my daughter was under the influence? Was it the way she was quietly typing, the suspicious manner in which she was drinking coffee, or perhaps the threatening way she was solving equations?" The sarcasm dripped from every Word, but underneath lay something more dangerous. Every cop in the room recognized it as the controlled fury of a parent whose child had been threatened. Several customers had stopped pretending to eat openly, watching the drama unfold. The teenager who'd been so eager to call authorities was learning what happened when those authorities included the victim's mother. She wouldn't leave when I told her to. Braxton managed, his voice cracking on the last word. The attempt at justification sounded pathetic even to his own ears. Around them, phones continued recording, capturing every stutter and stammer for posterity. Rodriguez stepped forward slightly. "Sir, are you an employee of this establishment?" The question was delivered with professional neutrality, but everyone could hear the trap closing. Braxton shook his head mutely. "Are you the owner or manager?" Another headshake. "Then what authority did you have to demand she leave? My mom's friend works here," Braxton blurted out, grasping for any lifeline. "She said there's always kids hanging around taking up space." The excuse sounded even weaker, spoken aloud, especially when Mrs. Delgado made a dismissive sound from behind the counter. "Sergeant Thompson," the manager interjected, her accent thickening with emotion. "This young lady is one of our best customers. Every day she comes, always polite, always buying something. Never once a problem. Today this boy comes in, starts harassing her for no reason. I was about to call you myself when he called 911. Amara absorbed this information with a slight nod, then turned back to Braxton. "So you took it upon yourself to police a private business where you have no authority, targeting a paying customer who is causing no disturbance. But that wasn't enough, was it? When she didn't immediately comply with your unauthorized demands, you decided to weaponize emergency services." "It wasn't like that," Braxton protested weakly, but even he didn't seem to believe his own words anymore. The story he'd constructed was crumbling under scrutiny, each lie becoming more obvious in the harsh light of examination. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the restaurant's aggressive air conditioning. "Then tell me what it was like," Amara pressed, stepping closer. "Explain to me why you looked at my daughter, a 16-year-old honor student, doing homework and saw a criminal. Help me understand what about her made you so certain she didn't belong here that you needed armed backup to remove her." The word armed hung in the air like an accusation. Everyone present understood the weight of it, the potential consequences of sending police after a black teenager based on lies. The videos circulating later would zoom in on Braxton's face at this moment, capturing the exact second he truly understood what he'd risked with his false report. "The laptop," he said desperately. "It looked like the one stolen from my car. Same model, same color." The claim sounded increasingly hollow, especially as Zara's Macbook sat closed on the table, its personalized engraving visible to anyone who looked. Kai finally found his voice, conscience overcoming loyalty. "That's not true, Brax. You never had your laptop stolen. You left it at Trevor's house after the party last weekend. Remember, you picked it up Monday." The betrayal in Braxton's eyes when he turned to his friend was absolute, but Kai pressed on. "I told you not to do this. I said she wasn't bothering anyone." The admission sent ripples through the room. Rodriguez and Chen exchanged glances while Amara's expression darkened further. "So there was no theft report?" Rodriguez asked, pulling out his phone. "No stolen MacBook, because filing a false police report is a serious crime, especially one designed to harass and intimidate." "I thought—" Braxton started, then stopped. What he'd thought was becoming increasingly irrelevant in the face of what he'd done. The reality of his situation was settling over him like a lead blanket, the weight of potential consequences crushing his earlier bravado into dust. Amara turned to her daughter, then her expression softening for just a moment. "Zara, baby, show the officers your laptop, please. Open it up." Zara complied with steady hands, though the effort it took was visible in the tension of her shoulders. The MacBook's screen came to life, revealing her desktop wallpaper a photo of her and her mother at last year's police charity run, both wearing matching finisher medals. "Officers, please note the serial number," Amara instructed, her tone returning to professional mode. "Also, note the engraving which reads Para mi Guerrera Mom 2023. That's Spanish for my warrior, a reference to my daughter's name. Zara means dawn in Arabic, but I've always called her my little warrior." The Apple store on 5th Street did that engraving on April 15th for her 16th birthday. "They'll have records." She pulled out her own phone with practiced efficiency. "I have the receipt right here, backed up to the cloud like everything else because I'm paranoid that way. $3,249, including Apple Care and the engraving. Paid in full, no payment plan because I saved for 6 months to buy my daughter a laptop that would last through college." The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. Braxton's story hadn't just collapsed. It had been revealed as a complete fabrication from start to finish. The silence in the restaurant was deafening, broken only by the sound of Amara's fingers on her phone screen as she pulled up additional documentation. "Now then," she continued, voice dropping back to that dangerous calm. "Let's discuss what actually happened here. You saw my daughter, a young black woman, with an expensive laptop and decided she must have stolen it. When she refused to be intimidated by your harassment, you called the police and deliberately lied to escalate the situation. You painted her as dangerous, aggressive, possibly armed, and under the influence. Each word was precise, building a case as methodically as any prosecutor. Do you understand what could have happened? Do you comprehend what you risked with your lies? Officers arrive expecting a dangerous, possibly armed suspect. Tensions are high. Movements are misinterpreted. Reaching for identification becomes reaching for a weapon in someone's frightened perception." Her voice cracked slightly on the last words, the professional facade slipping to reveal the terrified mother underneath. Zara reached out instinctively, touching her mother's arm in a gesture of comfort that reversed their usual roles. The small motion seemed to ground Amara, who took a deep breath before continuing. "You could have gotten my child killed," she said flatly, "because you didn't like seeing her in what you considered your space, because her very existence offended your sense of who belongs where, because calling 911 on black people for existing has become so normalized you didn't even hesitate." Braxton had gone white as paper, the full weight of his actions finally penetrating his privileged bubble. Behind him, Kai had started crying silently, tears streaming down his face as he grappled with his own complicity. The phone in his hand continued recording, forgotten in his distress. That's when the restaurant door burst open with enough force to make everyone jump. The woman who entered moved with the aggressive confidence of someone used to commanding rooms, her designer suit and expensive heels at odds with the McDonald's setting. Catherine Whitmore's perfectly styled blonde hair and furious expression made her look like an avenging angel dressed by Nordstrom. "What is going on here?" she demanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never been denied anything. Her eyes found Braxton, immediately took in his terrified expression, and the police presence and her protective instincts kicked into overdrive. "I'm District Attorney Catherine Whitmore, and that's my son. Someone better explain why he's being interrogated without parental presence." The title drop changed the room's dynamics yet again. Rodriguez and Chen straightened unconsciously while several recording customers adjusted their angles to better capture this new development. But Amara Thompson had faced down drug dealers, murderers, and corrupt officials in her 20-year career. One suburban district attorney protecting her spoiled son barely registered as a threat. "Mrs. Whitmore," Amara said with icy politeness, "how convenient that you're here. Your son has just filed a false police report, attempted to frame my daughter for theft, and made multiple false statements to emergency services. He claimed she was aggressive, possibly armed, and under the influence of drugs. All lies designed to weaponize law enforcement against a 16-year-old doing homework. Catherine's confident facade cracked slightly as she processed this information. Her gaze went to Zara, taking in the young woman's obvious intelligence and equally obvious distress, then back to her son. The quick calculation behind her eyes was visible as she shifted from offensive to defensive mode. "I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding," Catherine began, but Amara cut her off with a gesture. "No misunderstanding. Your son saw a black girl with an expensive laptop and decided she must be a thief." When she didn't cower at his harassment, he escalated to calling 911 with deliberate lies designed to paint her as dangerous. The two mothers faced each other across the McDonald's floor like gladiators in an arena of fluorescent lights and the smell of frying oil. One protected her child from injustice, the other scrambled to shield hers from consequences. The crowd watched with bated breath, phones capturing every second of the confrontation. Sergeant Thompson, Catherine's voice, took on a conciliatory tone. "Surely we can handle this without formal charges. Braxton is 17, headed to Duke on a lacrosse scholarship. One mistake shouldn't derail his entire future. He's just a kid who made a poor decision." Amara's laugh was sharp and humorless. "A poor decision? Your son weaponized the police against my daughter. Do you know how many black children have died from poor decisions like this? Do you understand that your son's lies could have resulted in my daughter's death, and you want to brush it off as a youthful mistake?" The accusation hung heavy in the air. Catherine's face flushed, but she pressed on. "He didn't mean for it to go this far. He's not racist. He has black friends on the team. This is just a misunderstanding that got out of hand." Her voice carried the desperate edge of a parent watching their child's future crumble. "Your son called 911 and said," and I quote, Amara pulled out her phone where she'd clearly received a transcript, "African-American female, approximately 16, becoming aggressive, reaching into her bag, repeatedly concerned. She might have a weapon, might be under the influence. Situation feels like it's escalating." She looked up from the screen. "Which part of that was a misunderstanding?" Rodriguez stepped forward, then his expression grave. "Mom filing a false police report is a Class B misdemeanor in this state. Given the deliberate nature of the false statements and the clear intent to harass, this could potentially be elevated to a felony charge. Your son is 17, which means he can be charged as an adult." Catherine's composure finally shattered completely. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "He's my only child. This will ruin everything. Duke will withdraw their offer. His future will be destroyed. Please, Amara, mother to mother, don't do this. He made a terrible mistake, but he's just a child." "So is my daughter," Amara replied quietly. "She's just a child who wanted to do her physics homework in peace. She's a child who maintains a 4.2 GPA while dealing with people like your son, questioning her right to exist in public spaces. She's a child who could have become a statistic today because your child decided she didn't belong." The weight of those words settled over the restaurant like a shroud. Zara, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation, finally spoke. Her voice was steady despite the tears tracking down her cheeks. "I was writing my college essay when he came over. Do you want to know what it's about? It's about believing in justice despite experiencing injustice. About maintaining faith in systems that don't always protect people who look like me." She opened her laptop again, turning it so everyone could see the document on screen. The title was clearly visible, "Why I Still Believe in Justice, a Personal Statement by Zara Okafor." "I've experienced racism before. Been followed in stores, had people clutch their purses when I pass, been told I'm articulate like it's a surprise. But I still believe that truth matters, that justice prevails." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "Your son didn't just try to get me arrested. He tried to break that belief. He used the very systems I want to dedicate my life to serving as weapons against me. Because I had the audacity to own something nice while being black. Because I dared to exist in his space without his permission. Catherine Whitmore seemed to shrink with each word, the reality of what her son had done, finally penetrating her protective maternal instincts. She turned to Braxton, who stood frozen like a deer in headlights. "Is this true? Did you really call the police with lies about this girl?" The question carried a mother's desperate hope for denial and the lawyer's recognition of evidence already seen. Braxton's response was barely a whisper. She didn't belong here." The words fell into silence like stones into deep water. Even he seemed to recognize how pathetic they sounded, how small and prejudiced and wrong. His mother's face crumbled as she realized the son she'd raised, the boy she'd protected and privileged, had become exactly the kind of person she'd taught him to respect in public while avoiding in private. The next hour passed in a blur of official procedures. Statements were taken from everyone involved, with Kai's video providing damning evidence of the entire encounter. Mrs. Delgado provided security footage that showed Zara sitting quietly for 23 minutes before Braxton approached her. The receipt for her coffee was time-stamped, proving she was indeed a paying customer. More police arrived, including internal affairs, to ensure everything was handled properly, given Amara's involvement. Through it all, Zara sat with quiet dignity, answering questions clearly and concisely. Her mother stayed close, but let her daughter speak for herself, pride and pain warring in her expression as she watched her child navigate a system that had nearly failed her. By evening, the videos had exploded across social media. Kai's footage, combined with those from other customers, painted a damning picture of privilege weaponized against innocence. The hashtag Justice for Zara trended within hours, accompanied by countless stories of similar experiences. Braxton's name became synonymous with racist false reporting, his lacrosse highlight reels buried under an avalanche of righteous anger. Duke University released a statement by 9 p.m. that night. "After reviewing the disturbing footage of today's incident, we are withdrawing our scholarship offer to Braxton Whitmore. Duke values integrity, respect, and justice. Mr. Whitmore's actions are antithetical to these values. We stand with Zara Okafor and all students who face discrimination and harassment." The Whitmore family home became a siege of media attention and public shame. Catherine's political career, built on being tough on crime, crumbled as people questioned how she'd raised a son who would commit such acts. Braxton deleted his social media after the death threats started, though the internet never forgets and screenshots lived forever. 3 months later, a different scene unfolded in a community center classroom. Braxton Whitmore sat in the back row of a racial justice workshop, one of 200 hours of community service ordered by the judge. His designer clothes had been replaced by simple jeans and a t-shirt, his cocky demeanor transformed into something quieter and more thoughtful. The facilitator was discussing unconscious bias when Braxton raised his hand for the first time in 12 sessions. "I used to think I wasn't racist because I had black teammates," he said, his voice carrying hard-won humility. "But I realized I only saw them as exceptions, good ones who were different from the others. I never questioned why I thought there were others or what made them different in my mind." The room was silent, processing this admission from someone they'd all seen in the viral videos. "I called the police on a girl who was smarter than me, more hardworking than me, more deserving of success than me. But all I could see was someone who didn't belong in my space. I nearly destroyed her life because I couldn't stand seeing her succeed where I thought only people like me belong." In the front row, Zara Okafor took notes on her rose-gold Macbook, one of several youth facilitators for the program. When the session ended, Braxton approached her hesitantly. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," he said quietly, "but I want you to know that I understand now. What I did, what I really did, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure I never do it again." Zara studied him for a long moment, seeing something in his eyes that hadn't been there 3 months ago. Growth, pain, understanding, maybe even the beginnings of genuine change. "You're right," she said finally. "You don't deserve forgiveness, but you do deserve the chance to earn redemption. Keep showing up. Keep learning. Keep growing. Maybe someday you'll become someone worth forgiving." 6 months after the incident, Zara Okafor stood at a podium addressing a packed auditorium. She'd been invited to speak at Northwestern University's freshman orientation, her story having become a catalyst for discussions about bias, justice, and resilience. The girl who'd just wanted to do physics homework in peace had become a voice for change. "That October afternoon taught me something important," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "It showed me that justice isn't just about laws and courts and consequences. It's about people standing up, speaking truth, and refusing to let injustice pass unchallenged. It's about cameras rolling when wrongdoing occurs and voices rising when silence would be easier." She paused, finding her mother in the audience, Amara's green eyes bright with tears and pride. "But it also taught me that change is possible. The person who called 911 on me now teaches anti-bias workshops to other youth. His mother resigned as DA and now works as a public defender. His friend who filmed everything became an advocate for police accountability. People can change, but only when we hold them accountable for who they are while believing in who they could become." The applause was thunderous. But in the quiet moment before it began, Zara thought about that afternoon at McDonald's. How a simple study session had become a viral moment that changed multiple lives. How her mother's fierce protection had saved her from becoming another statistic. How even in the darkest moments justice could still prevail if enough people demanded it. The story that began with a 911 call ended with something far more powerful than viral fame or legal consequences. It ended with transformation, redemption, and the radical hope that people could change, that systems could improve, that justice, though delayed and imperfect, could still prevail when enough people refused to accept anything less. And in a McDonald's on Riverside Boulevard, a new bronze plaque hung by the corner booth. It read simply, "Everyone belongs here," in multiple languages. Below it, smaller text added, "In memory of what happened here and in hope of what we can become." Because sometimes the most ordinary places become the backdrop for extraordinary change. Sometimes a girl just trying to do her physics homework can spark a revolution. And sometimes justice comes not with a bang, but with the quiet determination of people choosing to do better one decision at a time.